I warned you to stop. All you showed the universe was cruelty. But all flesh is grass, Cthulhu. Even yours. The grass weathers, but the word of the Time Lord victorious, that endures forever. That's such a cool line. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Time Lord victorious novel, The Knight, the Fool and the Dead, written by Steve Cole. We're going to have to talk about Time Lord victorious because that's a really big part. This is kind of actually really recent compared to everything else I've tackled. In fact, out of everything we've tackled so far, this is the most recent. It came out in, I believe, late 2020. So in terms of everything that we've talked about, this is one of the earliest things that I've tackled for the marathon. But what exactly is Time Lord victorious? Well, in 2019, early 2020, Big Finish announced, along with BBC, that there was going to be this massive multimedia event. And boy, was it massive. As when the full thing was announced, we had basically everything that owned the Doctor Who publishing rights, with the exception of the BBC TV series itself, all announcing projects for these things. We had audio dramas, books, comic books, short stories on little websites, comic books in both Titan Comics and the Doctor Who magazine. You had escape rooms, you had games, you had merchant t-shirt merchandising, part of the Time Lord victorious canon. It was this massive event that followed three Doctors in particular, the 8th, the 9th, and more specifically the 10th Doctor, with each story spanning out around the idea of the Time Lord victorious. Basically at the end of the 10th Doctor story, The Water of Mars, the Doctor essentially declared himself not just a survivor of the Time War, but the victor, the Time Lord victorious, in which basically he believed that laws of time are his to do as he please, and that time will obey him, and he basically can do whatever he wants. If he wants to save anybody, even if it's time sensitive, if they're like destined to die, well, tough. The Doctor's gonna save them, whatever. But then after that, we had Ood Sigma appear, and he basically announced that he's gone too far. He kind of realizes it, and the episode kind of leaves on a cliffhanger where the Doctor is in this very emotional state where he is kind of pondering. It's like, I am actually thinking about this. Do I have the right to alter time like this? With him, the last words in that is basically, he says no, as if he's defiant. He's fighting something inside him. Which is really odd, because in the next TV story, at the start of The End of Time, he would go on to just be this really silly, goofy character. And it seemed like that opportunity to tell some really dark and really interesting stories was just abandoned on the first chance it got. So the fact that not only was this brought back in expanded media, but it was made into this entire event. This is like a Marvel or DC comic event, when like everything ties together. Only, in my opinion, this is far bigger. This is one of the biggest projects I've ever seen, with the exception of, say, Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, in which you have like all of these different mediums just tying together. It's all canon, just to tell the story of the Time Lord victorious. The time the 10th Doctor basically fought the concept of death itself, with the main event, the main storyline revolving around the two novels. Well, it's mainly the second novel, but this novel basically leads into that novel, which is why we're talking about this here. I couldn't get everything Time Lord Victorious, as you can probably guess. I haven't talked about the 8th or 9th Doctor ones. I do apologise if you're interested in those. I haven't seen those. I did want to get the comic book, but with the end of that comic book, you had like different Doctors cameos, and the fact it didn't seem that important, I kind of like skipped it. So I wanted to get the most important story, which really delved into the Time Lord Victorious stuff, which just so happens to be the novel. So that's how we're here today. So we have Night on the Fool of the Dead, which basically is the in-between between Waters of Mars and the final story, the big climatic story of Time Lord Victorious. Can I just say though, Night the Fool and the Dead, that's a fantastic title. I absolutely adore it. I will say as well, this video is going to contain massive spoilers, especially towards the end. This is one story which I highly recommend you read, because, just to spoil my opinions on it, this novel is great. This novel is amazing, and from what I can gather, a lot of people... Okay, we are going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about the opinions of this book, and we're going to talk about the opinions of the Time Lord Victorious overall. Because a lot of people like this novel, this one in particular, saying that, you know, it's a really great setup, you really get the idea of the characters, blah, 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 you know. It's generally liked by the fan base. However, when Time Lord Victorious was even announced, it got heavily criticised. A lot of people felt like this mass, because a lot of Doctor Who fans, let's be honest, are collectors. They like collecting everything. And basically you had these expensive novels, audio dramas, you had these t-shirts, you had the games, you had the live experiences, which a lot of people cannot see. I do plan on seeing it eventually. I do hope I will get to see it, but I will put in my head that I might not be able to get to see it. So, which is a shame, which is a real shame. I would really have loved to see it. Hopefully I will. Fingers crossed. They announced that Joe Martin's in it, which is fantastic. But anyway, so yeah, and you know, a lot of people criticise the idea of the Time Lord Victorious with one of the main issues, apart from, of course, how expensive everything is, if you want to get into the entire story, is that there are massive contradictions to each story, which we'll get onto in here. But I will say I'm not an expert on Time Lord Victorious. I've only gotten into the books and the free stuff, which reminds me as well, there's also a free short story which is was released on the newsletter website called Dawn of the Cthulhu, which I was planning on tackling with this, but I feel like this was worth talking about itself. But Dawn of Cthulhu, just to talk about that a little bit, it's a short little story. Basically it deals with the alien race, which is the main villain of this story. They judge this planet, this first planet, and we essentially learn that these are a race that basically bestow lifespans on creatures during the Dark Times. The Dark Times is this massive part of Doctor Who lore, basically before real historic records were recorded. It was basically like this really mysterious historical past in the galaxy, and a majority, if not all races back then, were in some way, shape or form immortal. Some of them like don't even know the concept of death. Some of them can die, but like by accident, if they were stabbed or something, like they're like fighting or something, but they can't die of old age. And so the Cthulhu basically bestow lifespans on races, and they are essentially the creators of mortality, and they go around planets basically judging these species and giving them lifespans, and sometimes they can be really cruel, like giving a race only 3 months in their average lifespan. So these races, the people of this particular race only live for 3 months, that kind of stuff. And that makes him a really great presence. I think in terms of just characters, they might be a little bit lacking. But yeah, that's what this story's talking about. Because as we start off this story, the Doctor is actually in the Dark Times, which is very odd because it's been stated in a few stuff in expanded media where it says like time travelers can't actually travel to the Dark Times, they're time locked. But in other cases, they are completely free to time travelers. It's just that time is so mysterious and so dangerous that, like, unless you go there with a death wish, then don't go to the Dark Times. So there's a bit of that kind of continuity error. It's explained here at the start of this novel that the Doctor actually came into the Dark Times during a time fracture, which might tie into the live escape room event, which is also called Time Fracture. I'm not quite sure, but we basically learn that the Doctor has just come right after the events of Waters of Mars, in which he's come to the Dark Times mainly to, curiosity, because, he's never been to the Dark Times before, as far as he is aware. But he's also just, thinking about, how he went too far, and that there's this mortal coil on his soul where it's like he's thinking about, he could stop, all of these important people from dying, but there seems to be this unjustified moral compass in his eyes where he has to let people die. It's why should he's a time traveler, he's the Time Lord Victorious, why should he let people die? So here kind of starts the story not being the Time Lord Victorious, but is kind of thinking I went too far, but did I really go too far? As he basically goes into a time where basically everyone is an immortal, and he actually goes to this place called the Temple of the Ending, a graveyard essentially for this entire species, with this entire species only having a handful of dead people. I believe they said 15. I could be wrong. The number could actually be lower, but there's only a handful of this entire species that have died in their history. And the Doctor's absolutely amazed by this. It's how could this be wrong? How can letting these people live, even if it disturbs maybe a little bit of the timeline, how could this leaving these people die be a good thing? How can saving these people be a bad thing? These people love life. They adore life. They're immortals. They will do anything in their power for life. They know the value of life, but then they're also an immortal race. Where's the wrong in that? And he's contemplating. So when we talk about novels, a lot of people always ask me, it's how immersive are they? Can you read this story and picture David Tennant reading his words? My opinion? Hell yes. I think that could be as well. This story does heavily connect to his character in a particular story, a mindset that ended off in one particular story. So it is that easier tie-in to that adventure. And so you can go watch that story and go straight into this, and you can feel the connective there. But I think as well, Stephen Cole, who's also written a few other 10th Doctor novels during the 10th Doctor era when David Tennant was on screens at the time, means that when he wrote this story, he was already familiar with the character, has his word patterns, has that way of speaking. And even though this is a 10th Doctor story where he is in a very different mindset to majority of his stories, it still feels like David Tennant's in this role. And I absolutely adore this. But not as much as I adore the plot of this adventure, because essentially he learns that the race on this planet that he's basically come to think about his moral compass at the moment. They basically have in this expedition, something is happening where this ship has come down to their planet, and it's like offering them this chance to stop the dangers of the Cthulhu, the race which is coming around the galaxy and bestowing lifespan on races. And this ship comes down basically offering these people salvation with this saint called the Life Shroud, which apparently can protect you from all forms of life. And with the and they actually show an example by having this little girl who actually appears right at the start in a prologue to the story, where we see her entire family get, her entire race basically getting murdered by the Cthulhu, and she jumps out a window. That sounds really funny out of context. And so she basically becomes an example, and she gets shot on stage, and even though she's in massive amounts of pain, she is actually alive, and seemingly the Life Shroud works. And so a bunch of people start buying it, start collecting it. However, someone in the audience is fighting the Doctor and also trying to get their hands on the girl, Estatine. This character is Brian the Ood, a character who's appeared in other Time Lord Victoria's storylines, mainly with the Eighth Doctor. He somehow, in an Eighth Doctor adventure, found himself in the Dark Times here, which is strange because the 10th Doctor doesn't actually remember who Brian is, and he's a Ood assassin who has a split personality disorder where he believes his translation sphere, the ball that the Ood carry, which can also be used as a weapon, can speak to him, and he calls him Mr. Ball. And I love Brian the Ood. This character is just so much fun. He has that kind of serious, but also very silly thing about him. I love the fact that he just walks around in a butler suit as well. And he has this kind of servant, but he's also maniacal, he just loves killing people. He says he's an assassin, he'll kill people if he's hired to, but he also is really trigger happy as well. A trigger happy Ood who's mentally unstable is just a lot of fun. But it also leads into a pretty decent action scene in terms of writing, where the Doctor basically tries to befriend this girl and tries to keep her safe, because despite her being seemingly immortal, she does feel pain, and the Doctor tries to help her, and she at the moment, she doesn't want anything to do with the Doctor. And this kind of storyline reminds me a lot of James Bond. When you have this henchman character trying to attack someone in the crowd, you've got our main man hero character trying to protect this innocent girl character who seemingly wants nothing to do with the main character, and seemingly is not working for the bad guys, but is in line with them at the moment, even if they don't know how bad the situation is. And the Doctor's basically protecting her, in this case, for her well-being. He actually does care for this person and wants to know why the Ood is killing him. And as I said, at this point, he doesn't know that, he doesn't remember Brian the Ood. I don't know if that's explained. It's never explained in this novel how he doesn't remember, but it is mentioned that the Ood has met the Eighth Doctor at one point, because there's something strange in this novel, which is a criticism of mine. There are 3 interludes. This story is 16 chapters. Yeah, 16 chapters, but there's also 3 interludes, so that leads it up to 17, 18, 19 chapters overall. And these interludes basically take place in the Doctor's timeline throughout the adventures, and they basically explain the story of the Godfather Death, the Brothers Grimm tale. And you have one with the 8th Doctor and Brian the Ood, you have one with Rose and the 9th Doctor. You also have the 1st Doctor during the events of the Caves of Skull segments in the Unearthly Child, where Barbara explains to Doctor the story. That's very strange. I don't know what it has connection with the Time Lord Victorious, why they would connect it to Unearthly Child. And also as well, the way the story is written, basically it takes place in the perspective of Barbara, and instead of saying the Doctor, it says just old man, makes it really confusing, in my opinion, for newer viewers who aren't so familiar with the classic series. Somebody could pick this up, read that chapter, and have no idea that that is actually supposed to be the first incarnation of our favourite time traveller. I don't know if it's really a criticism, because I am familiar with the first Doctor. I got the references, I was cheering as hell, but a part of me felt like if I wasn't aware of those, if I was reading this as a standalone novel, those interludes might have been kind of distracting you. But apart from the interludes, this story is really well written. As basically we get this group as the Ood basically starts befriending the Doctor and Estetine, and Estetine starts throughout the story starts slowly liking the Doctor, as she can see. I love the relationship here between the Doctor and Estetine, as she can see that the Doctor does genuinely care about her, and the Doctor has no vindication, has no ulterior motive, but other than just at the moment just look after this person. It's like she's a reminder that, he fights for good and stuff. Not that he was never at this point, worried about that, but this could also be like a linchpin to the Doctor becoming the Time Lord Victorious, because she is technically destined to die, but she has this ability to be immortal. As we learn that, there's this, she was working for this woman called Professor Phalamax, who is developing this Life Shroud technology. However, plot twist, spoiler warning, the Life Shroud doesn't actually work. The suit works with a particular crystal, however, the crystal couldn't be given in time, so that race that the Doctor was on, they got judged by the Cthulhu, and they were sentenced to, I believe it was 15 months. So everyone over the age of 15 months on that race is immediately turned to dust. And it's such a horrible imagery that you can really justify the Doctor's point of view here. But later on, Phalamax kind of joins this crew as they learn about this mercenary, and throughout the story there's also a few encounters with the Cthulhu, who have this really eerie, Grim Reaper-like presence to them, and just the main concept of them, because we know that death, at least in our time, is a constant. You can't cheat it, you can't change it. Completely getting rid of it, becoming immortal, is seen as a bad thing in our times. With stories like the Five Doctor, he who wins shall lose, and whoever shall lose shall win. Stating like Rassilon knew that immortality was a curse as well as a blessing. We've had multiple, if not thousands, of Doctor Who story pushing this point across. However, we're at a moment in time where the Doctor is in a state where he is fighting the monster, which essentially brings that concept into being. If he defeats them, he will change time forever, so that death by old age is no longer a thing in the timelines. And so he is basically like, I don't know what to do here. If I fight the monsters, I basically go up against everything that I've held dear for so many years, for almost 50 years in real life Doctor Who canon. For Doctors, like 9,000 years, isn't it? So it puts the Doctor in a really great emotional linchpin, and what really holds it all together is the character of Estetine, because we basically learn that she has this natural immunity to what is called the Cthulhu's design this, they basically have this like weird wall which grants them their power, and whoever can like source it out could effectively use their power. But also, as well, as the Doctor basically learns, it can also drive people mad, as the Doctor actually looks at this wall at one point and he starts like chanting to himself these words, and essentially all the time these people chant the words, they basically predict when the Cthulhu come to judge a particular race on a particular planet. But yeah, so the Doctor is like really, he's trying to like, he's in the balance of like, should I get involved in this? Should I fight these monsters? I shouldn't really. I know that these things are irrelevant. I should, death is a constant. I'm fighting the creature that basically invented it. If I defeat them, the thing, and he wants to like go, he wants to leave. He basically wants to like leave the Time Lord victorious behind. But what's stopping him is his friendships between the Ood, Brian the Ood, who basically tries to push him. The Ood has no remorse on defeating the Cthulhu. In fact, at one point granting the Doctor an entire armada after they've defeated a mercenary group. That's kind of a really big spoiler. But this video is terrible for people who want, if you want no spoilers, please do not watch this video at all. And the Doctor's granted this army, and Brian is actually kind of like pushing it. He's like the devil on the Doctor's shoulder, pushing the Doctor to essentially go into this. And Estetine, she is kind of the angel. The Doctor, it's her friendship, the fact that the Cthulhu are after her. They want her, they want to get to her. She is the main target for the Cthulhu. Essentially, they try and follow her, and the Doctor doesn't want to see this little girl. I need to state this. She's a little girl. She's a child. The Doctor doesn't want her to be harmed, and the only way that she will ever be safe, if she will be safe at all, is if the Cthulhu was stopped. And that is kind of like the linchpin that's keeping him there. And that idea could have gone absolutely horrible. This idea really holds on a linchpin to this novel. Is the Doctor and Estetine's relationship well-defined? And I say it is, because that's the majority of the story. And I love how it's developed through the story. I mean, from the Doctor, he's always caring and kind and will do anything for her and sees the innocence in her. But she starts off hating him because he interferes in Phalamax's plan. Then she kind of becomes like, she sees him as like this kind individual who she kind of has this kind of bond with. And then basically she kind of like looks up to him and knows that if she stays with him, she won't be harmed. And basically like, she is the Doctor's companion at this point, along with Brian the Ood. So we have this small group of characters in this story that basically team up. And the final few chapters of this story really intensifies as the Doctor basically makes the decision. He basically learns how he can defeat them. He basically gets the Life Shroud working. But not only does he get it working, he actually finds a way to not only defend themselves against the Cthulhu, but actually fight back. Because he knows the Cthulhu won't stop. They will find a way eventually. The only way to stop the Cthulhu, the only way to defend themselves truly, is by attacking them first. And Estetine actually is like afraid of the Doctor at this point. She's like, I hate the Cthulhu as much. I mean, they tried to murder me, but I couldn't wipe out I can't create genocide. I can't hate them that much. I don't know, I'm still a kind and lovely person. And she kind of sees this dark side of the Doctor that she really doesn't want to see. But the Doctor, in the last few chapters, is basically becoming the Time Lord victorious, as he's actually like really pondering at the moment, and he actually makes these two particular type of crystals, which will reflect the Cthulhu's design upon them. One he calls the Sentence of Life, which will free the Cthulhu and let them live out their ways. But he also has the Sentence of Death, which will revert their design, their gift, as they call it, back at them, and so they will be having a very short lifespan. And the Doctor's like, even how dark I've gone, even if I haven't considered this, I need to give him a choice. I need to give them an opportunity. I need to give him a chance, like the Ninth Doctor did with the Nestine Consciousness at the start of Rose, which is a really nice tie-in, and the Crinitane in the school reunion, where the Doctor's like, you only get one warning. So you got that really familiar Doctor aspects until the Cthulhu basically wipe out a majority, like a bunch of characters, including Estatine. She essentially is forced to basically kill the Doctor. She's being mind controlled because that's one of the Cthulhu's powers. They can essentially mind control people. But she is strong enough that she actually reverberates the beam back at herself, and without being very weak at the state with being surrounded with the Cthulhu, actually is fully, without question, dead. And the Doctor, he's basically lost his sentence of life. And so he uses the sentence of death and kills, essentially puts the Cthulhu, gives them their life sentence reverted back to him. And he announces that he is, without a doubt, at this moment in time, the Time Lord victorious. As he domes his Time Lord robes with the big headpiece and is ready to go to battle on the planet of Mandela, the home world of the Cthulhu, because not only does he just want to wipe them all out, cause genocide on the race and invent death, but destroy their home planet in fear that somebody could find the technology, the magic of the sentencing people, these races' lifespan. And he wants to know what way that they can come back. So he just basically strives to get this armada that Brian has aimed from and go to the planet. Now, this is where we have massive spoilers. This is at the end of the novel. So massive spoilers. Be warned. The Doctor gets ready. He is ready to fire. He tries to kind of convince himself that he's still doing the right thing. When Brian basically tells him, should I fire? It's like the Doctor's saying, no. Don't say fire. This isn't a weapon. This is a mirror. This is a reflection. Just say go. And the Doctor's about to say go. Only something happens. A saucer ship appears in front of the battlefield. A saucer ship that the Doctor's familiar with. It's a Dalek ship. And then a screen appears. And who is on the Dalek ship? None other than the Doctor. The 8th Doctor. And then another ship appears. A vampire ship. And another screen communication device appears. And it's the 9th Doctor. Essentially telling their future incarnation, the 10th Doctor, don't do this. I know what you're trying to do and it's wrong. It's just wrong. Don't do it. And the Doctor is just like, no. I am right. My old selves are wrong. If they want to fight, let them fight. And so the story ends with the Doctor, the Time Lord victorious incarnation, stating to his armada, fire. Leaving on a cliffhanger which will lead into the next novel. So that's The Night, the Fool and the Dead. Overall, this was such a great novel. I was so glad that this novel is as good as it is. I was pleasantly surprised. I wasn't really expecting much. I thought, this will just tie into the bigger, more interesting story, which everybody is interested in, and it also ties in with Order of the Dead. So I was looking forward to this, but I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it came out to be. This novel is fantastic. It's well engaging. The plot is interesting. It goes at speed paced. I mean, I'm somebody who struggles with novels. I peaked at this in like 2 days. That's amazing for me. I was really hooked into this. The characters are so likeable and charming. Bryony Ood is just a godsend in character, fun characters. The Doctor's moral compass in the story is so skewed by the end of the novel, and it's essentially Doctor Who does The Joker. You know the movie The Joker with Joaquin Phoenix? It's essentially that. As the Doctor starts off as a kind person, and then he slowly, because the world is just how miserable the world is, he turns into a bad guy. That's pretty funny. I like that. This is basically the Doctor Who equivalent of the Joker. So, highly recommended it from me. Although, of course, this leads into a cliffhanger for the second novel. So, I'm going to actually hold up my reservation in case that novel is pretty bad. But we will get there when we get there. So that's Night, the Fool and the Dead. So join me next time where we will find out what the Daleks have been up to prior to the events of Time Lord Victorious. As we delve into a free, so you can all watch this at home, YouTube mini-series. So join me next time for Dalek, Time Lord Victorious. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!